A New Beginning in a Small Town. Book 3, Love in Harmony Valley Series. By Melinda Curtis. Chapter 1. Life was a numbers game. Count the years, count the money, count the marriages, count the mistakes. Slade Jennings was 32 years old, had millions in the bank, one failed marriage, and one horrendous mistake. He knew what he looked like walking down the street: success. Wrinkle-free khakis, wrinkle-free button-down, Italian designer tie. Rolex. Titanium and onyx pinky ring. Dark as midnight hair, expensively cut. Eyes the color of money, always on the lookout for the next deal. Slade had come from humble beginnings and wasn't going back. Except, he had gone back to his roots, that was, damaged though they may be. That was what you did for friends who were also your business partners. You went with the flow, even if that meant returning to your hometown, to the house you'd grown up in, to the house where both your parents died, the scene of the horrendous mistake. Harmony Valley's Bridge Club called the house at 1313 Harrison Street the death and divorce house. In Slade's lifetime there hadn't been any divorces. But there had been plenty of deaths. His mother gave in to melanoma in the master bedroom. His father hung himself 6 years later in the closet of the same room. It was the culmination of everything that was wrong with Slade's life. He'd lost his career, his bank account, and then his family. That was 8 years ago. The house on Harrison represented failure, which was why it was vital Slade present only success to the world. While in Harmony Valley, Slade was living in the death and divorce house. To stay elsewhere seemed like a betrayal. But stay in the master bedroom? No. He slept in the bedroom of his youth. He'd returned to town earlier that year with Will Jackson and Flynn Harris, his childhood friends and the two programming geniuses behind a successful farming app. Slade was their sidekick and the partnership's moneyman, the one who managed the bottom line, watched their backs, and made sure they didn't get the short end of the stick in any negotiations. So, why weren't they back in Silicon Valley leveraging their achievement? Because Will and Flynn burned out designing their first app. They were all local boys, if not best friends when they were growing up, as close as brothers now. When they showed up to decompress after 5 years of sharing a cramped apartment with the thinnest walls on the planet, they'd been asked by the town council to start a business to help save their hometown. Why did it need saving? An explosion 14 years ago at the grain mill had wiped out Harmony Valley's main employer. The ripple effect forced those too young to retire to move closer to jobs, and all but a handful of businesses to shut down. Located in the northernmost corner of Sonoma County, Harmony Valley was becoming a remote retirement village. The population had dwindled below 80, with the average age of residents above 75. Given that Slade preferred Harmony Valley become a ghost town when all the old-timers died, he'd voted against the partnership starting a business here. Then he protested their choice of business, a winery. They were 3 guys who drank beer. What did they know about making wine? Outvoted on all counts, he'd still stood by his friends through arguments with blustery octogenarians, a mountain of legal and financial paperwork, and the ups and downs of construction. Today, the shell of the winery was finally completed. The winemaker they'd hired, Christine Alexander, granddaughter of a town council member, would the nepotism never end, was due to start work today and provide Slade with her input on the guts of the winery, juice presses, tanks, barrels, and whatever else she needed to make great wine. Really great wine aficionados would drop a C-note to drink a glass. That profit appealed to Slade. Because if they were going to make wine, it'd be the best wine around, worth a premium price, and make the partners a pretty penny. Slade checked his Rolex. Christine was late. He sat on the porch of the old farmhouse they'd converted into an office and tasting room, and loosened the knot of his bright green tie. Summer was in full swing. The air was hot and dry. Barely a breeze swayed the palm trees lining the 100-yard-long, newly graveled drive. The 60-foot-tall eucalyptus trees that marched along the river were silent, as well. Occasionally, a cricket offered complaint. Something shook the house, a slight tremor that had Slade leaping up. Earthquake? The horse weather vane on top of the main winery building rocked, spun, then quieted. The ground settled and Slade drew a deep breath. As a native Californian, he was used to small, infrequent tremors. That didn't mean they didn't send his body humming with adrenaline faster than a double shot of espresso. His phone buzzed, announcing a text message from Flynn. "Did you feel that?" His reply, "Yes. Winery is fine." A big, black SUV turned into the driveway. He'd thought Christine owned a small, newer model Audi. At least, that was what she'd driven up in for her job interview last month. He shifted his tie knot back into place and walked down the circular drive to meet her. Only it wasn't Christine. It was his ex-wife, Evangeline, a native New Yorker. Two shadows bobbed in the back seat, his twin 10-year-old daughters, Faith and Grace. Slade was simultaneously overjoyed and overwhelmed. No one had told him they were coming. He wasn't ready. He ran to the drive to meet them anyway, smiling. Evangeline toggled the window open and frowned, wiping the smile off his face. Slade hadn't seen her since Christmas, but she was as stylish as ever in a bold, tiger print blouse and chunky jewelry. Her black hair was short and blunt cut, framing her strikingly angular face, making her two white teeth seem as sharp as her temper. To be fair, her temper only extended to Slade and her second ex-husband. "I thought you'd be at the house," Evangeline said coolly. "We saw Will in town, and he told us you were here. If this is inconvenient, I'll make other plans." And she sounded happy to do so. "No, not at all," Slade rushed to say. Months ago, Evangeline had called and, amid a rant about how she resented the revised visitation agreement, had told him she would abide by it and let the girls stay with him while she and her new husband, provider of the 4-carat monstrosity on her slender finger, took a delayed honeymoon to the south of France. Evangeline didn't like sharing the girls with him, which was why Slade had agreed to increase child support recently. But while they were renegotiating, he also brought down the judge's gavel on enforcing his parental rights. He was supposed to see the twins every third month, but Evie never followed through. If she was here, husband number 3 must be something. And that something was spontaneous because they weren't due to leave for France for another 2 weeks. Slade leaned farther in the window to greet his daughters. "Hey, girls. What a nice surprise. Holy moly." They looked like miniature, identical Gothic vampires. If his mother wasn't already dead, she'd have splashed them with holy water. "Don't judge," Evangeline scolded in a muted voice. "It's a phase. Today, goth, tomorrow princesses. 10-year-old girls have phases?" Slade forced himself to smile. "Took me by surprise is all, Evie. You know I don't like it when you call me that." He did. He winked at the girls. They didn't smile or laugh or give any indication that they appreciated being included in his inside joke as they once had done. That was probably his punishment for only seeing them twice a year, for not pushing harder for quarterly visitation. For making a life in California, not New York. Slade opened the back door so the twins could get out. Up close, it was even worse. Black lipstick, black eyeliner, black lace blouses over yellow and black plaid capris. He hoped to heaven the short blonde hair with thin black streaks were wigs. "Are they only 10? They presented themselves much older. Two silent strangers slid out of the vehicle. A far cry from the plump, happy babies he used to rock to sleep. Or the grinning, sturdy 2-year-olds that he used to push on swings. Or even the happy-go-lucky 9-year-olds they'd been last summer. Good thing he'd been hanging out with Flynn and his 7-year-old nephew the past month, or he wouldn't have had a clue how to deal with them. Slade tousled Faith's hair. She was the twin with a dimple that rarely disappeared on her cheek, even when she frowned at him and straightened her wig. Grace came to stand next to her. They stared at him in wordless retribution. 10. Wow. He'd thought teenage angst started at 13. "You'll be all right, won't you, girls?" Evangeline waited for their nods before she ordered Slade to get their things. Her attitude was starting to cinch his collar tighter around his neck, but it didn't make sense to argue. Their things included 4 huge suitcases, 3 Nordstrom shopping bags, 2 identical backpacks with angry manga characters, and 1 stuffed lion the size of a large dog. Slade dutifully loaded it all into the bed of his new black truck, giving himself and the girls a pep talk. "We're going to have a good time, aren't we?" No one answered. Evangeline reeled each girl in with one hand for fierce hugs. "You be good like I told you and you'll be safe." She gave Slade a sharp look that could have cut metal. "I'm trusting you with my babies." She named the date she wanted them back in New York, as if his daughters were on loan. Since they'd separated 8 years ago, he'd wanted to spend more time with the twins than his twice-a-year visits. The new settlement had given him hope. He'd pictured happy vacations to amusement parks and sunny beaches. He'd imagined laughter and enthusiasm and emotional hugs. He dreamed of having them for a day, a weekend, a week. And here was reality. His girls had misplaced fashion limits, stared at him mutely, and there were nearly 30 days looming ahead like a prison sentence. Day 1 on the job and Christine Alexander was late. That didn't mean she expected to show up for work and see a glamorous-looking woman doing the tiptoe run around a black SUV, in skyscraper heels, or a pair of identical little goth girls. Not this far away from civilization. Not outside an anime film. Not at her place of employment. Christine had thought she was escaping the high drama, high fashion, high-ego circus that was Napa wine making for the more laid-back Sonoma County scene. The queen bee in high heels gunned the SUV around the circular driveway. A relief. Although the goth girls were still a caution. Christine parked her old bucket with its deceased air conditioner next to the big black truck that remained, turned off the ignition, and received a very brutal, vibrating massage as the engine fought and coughed and hiccuped trying to stay alive. It wasn't until it wheezed its last breath that Christine risked getting out. Her boss, Slade, did a double take. The well-worn car. Christine in her red Keds, faded blue jean shorts, and black useless snobbery band t-shirt. Never mind that winemaking was a hands-on, messy job. Her new boss didn't seem to understand that. The little optimistic light inside her that had placed such high hopes on this position, for loyalty, for legitimacy, and a nest egg for her future, faded. She tossed her long blonde ponytail over a shoulder, wishing she'd at least taken the time to put it in a French braid. The fancier hairstyle made her look more serious and kept her hair off her neck, which was now hot and sweaty. It had to be 95 degrees today, if not pushing 100. "Hey," she said to the two girls. They didn't move or quit staring, which was kind of creepy. Goth mini mannequins. "Slade, good to see you again." Christine closed the distance between them and shook her boss's hand. His handshake was perfect, not bone-crushing hard, not limp. Just the right amount of grip and shake. But then again, Slade was perfectly put together. He could have modeled for a living. He was tall and lean, with a hard chin, sculpted cheekbones, and black hair that was always tamed, always controlled. Seriously, the guy was so perfect, he almost didn't have a personality. She wouldn't have fought for this job if she was only working for Slade. He was everything she was leaving behind, name-brand posturing and excess. It had been Flynn, one of Slade's business partners, who convinced Christine to accept the job. He'd taken one look at her suit and high heels the day of the interview and said, "You look nice, but if we hire you, I don't ever want to see you in a suit again. We're beyond casual around here." Such was the joy of working for two millionaires who'd made their fortunes in the tech world. Will and Flynn didn't stand on ceremony like those in the wine industry. They shunned hosting black tie, sequined events. And then there was her third millionaire boss, Slade. "I'm sorry I didn't dress for the office." She gestured in the region of his fabulous tie. "I was trying to move the last of my things to town." "That's all right." His accepting tone contradicted his disapproving expression. "Did you feel the earthquake a few minutes ago? I'm assuming you're not talking about my car's unique way of shutting off." She gave him her best smile and laugh with me 1-2 combo, scoring a point when he smiled back, even though the goth girls blanked her. "I may have felt something coming down Main. I thought it was bad gas knocking." "Not hardly." She thought her old beater would suffice and had given up her lease on the Audi. She was in penny-pinching mode, living here with her grandmother, saving for a down payment on her own vineyard. She wouldn't have given up the Audi if she'd known her college car was in desperate need of a tune-up or a new engine or a trip to the scrapyard. It's a toss-up whether it was your car or the Tremor, Slade deadpanned. He turned to the girls. These are my daughters. His? Get out of town. Grace, Slade gestured from one girl to the other, and Faith. So that was your wife leaving? He said curtly. Immediately, Christine wished she could take the question back. Slade probably thought she was digging for information to see if he was single. What she really wanted was reassurance that tie-wearing Slade was more interested in the substance of the wine she made than the image he presented to the outside world. The wine industry attracted almost as many grandstanders as Hollywood. She didn't care if Slade wore a parka in this heat, as long as their vision for their wine meshed. Slade smoothed his tangerine-colored, paisley tie. After our tour, we'll head over to El Rosal for a cool drink. Or some ice cream. This latter part she assumed was an offer for the twins. Little did Slade know Christine liked ice cream almost as much as she liked wine. He led them into the tasting room inside the original farmhouse, the girls trailing behind Christine like silent wraiths. Everything in the tasting room smelled of new construction, of sawed wood and fresh paint. The otherwise empty room had a large blue marble counter, behind which was a built-in oak buffet. And blessedly, they'd installed air conditioning. And it was turned on. Christine took a moment to stand near the vent as she looked around. And then the impact of the room won her over, drawing her toward the buffet. Is that original? Christine ran a hand over the buffet's polished wood. It's beautiful. It is. We were able to save much of the planked flooring, as well. This house was built over 100 years ago by Jeremiah Henderson. The property remained in Henderson hands until we bought it earlier this year. He spoke as if he was behind a lectern, coolly enunciating every syllable. No awkward pauses, lisps, or stutters. The poor man is so personality-free, it's sad. It's been remodeled, Slade continued, and had additions over the years, but this room is the original front parlor. It wasn't every day a man used the word parlor in front of Christine. It drew her gaze to his perfectly formed lips. She licked her own, her gaze falling to his feet. His loafers weren't knockoffs. The workmanship and shine said very clearly, I'm Italian. We also have a bathroom and a full kitchen here. He led her to the rear of the house. She passed through a doorway, dragged her gaze from the feet she was following, and fell in love once more. I want to live here. Baby blue marble countertops, soft white cabinets, and a double-wide porcelain farm sink. They may have built this place out in the boonies, but they'd spared no expense. Christine could hardly wait to start talking about the winemaking equipment they'd be purchasing. It's nice, isn't it? His smile was unexpectedly humble. She would have bet on chest-thumping pride. The office space is upstairs. Slade led her up a narrow staircase. We couldn't see a way to widen these without losing valuable space below. The footprint of the house is only 1,000 square feet. The office was an open, empty space with front-facing dormers and soft blue walls. The windows had no coverings, allowing the sun to beat in and suck the life out of the air. She glanced around for vents, finding only one. She turned and raised her brows at Slade. I put a request in for another vent. He sounded distracted. We didn't think about desks until after the remodel was almost finished. Can't get anything bulky up the stairs, so we're ordering table desks where staff can work sitting or standing. Love those. She'd work on a plywood desk held up by sawhorses in exchange for the power over all winemaking decisions. What about the? Slade put a finger to his lips. That was when she noticed they were alone. Soft whispers drifted to them from downstairs. Slade smiled broadly, like a pop-up bear finding joy in his cubs. Whoa. Mr. Perfect loves his goth girls. Like, really loves them. It surprised Christine so much she was sure she reflected his grin right back at him. The humanness, so unexpected, explained why his everyday guy business partners put up with him. The whispers stopped. You'll get blinds or something up here, I assume. Christine quickly filled the void. Plantation shudders. He was still smiling at her, as if they'd shared a private moment and he wasn't ready to let the feeling go. Let's check out the main winery. Maybe he wasn't all state ego and self-image. Maybe he'd had a business meeting earlier. Maybe he'd had a meeting before every time she'd met him previously. That would explain why she'd never seen him without a tie. But there was something about his rigid posture that negated that hypothesis. From the farmhouse, they crossed the circular drive toward a barn-like structure on the same property. They'd only just broken ground on it when Christine had first interviewed. She hadn't imagined it would look so welcoming and yet be so huge, nestled amid row after row of grapevines. Untended, overgrown grapevines. Christine was antsy to get started. The road to harvest wouldn't be easy. The heat pressed down on her once more, like a thick blanket on her body. Christine didn't know how Slade could stand wearing a tie. The only concession he'd made to the heat was rolling up his shirt sleeves, revealing well-muscled, tan forearms. Christine stepped through the 40-foot-high double doors into the cavernous, blessedly cooler, would-be winery. The new construction smell was less noticeable here with the doors thrown open. It was empty, just metal support beams, concrete, and wood. But to Christine, it was paradise. She could easily visualize how to fill it with equipment. This was the site of the original barn, which we were unable to salvage. Was that a wistful note in his voice? We built this to look like the original homestead outside, but big enough to accommodate processing up to 80,000 cases of wine. 80,000 cases? Each case contained 12 bottles. He was talking close to 1 million bottles. That wasn't a small output. Red flag. Serious red flag. Slade. Christine carefully kept her voice even, her expression polite. As I understand it, you only own 40 acres of vineyard. That's enough to produce about 5,000 cases. 75,000 less than his planned capacity. Christine tried to ignore the alarm buzzing in her head. She'd been hired to produce boutique wine in small quantities, hired to obtain top ratings and reviews, hired to help build Harmony Valley Vineyards into something prestigious and rare. 80,000 cases crossed the border from rare territory into the gray zone, flirting with a fall into the quirky, quaffable territory occupied by wine costing less than $10 a bottle. Wines with cartoony icons and names like my boyfriend's favorite red, mommy's personal Pinot Grigio, or Bowtie Bordeaux. What's the use of starting a company if you don't plan for growth? It's where we need to be in 5 years. He stepped from the light into the shadows, his green gaze on her intense. Does success scare you? No, failure did. As her dad so often reminded Christine, her reputation was only as good as her last score in the Bible of wine review magazines. In just a few months, she'd find out in print if she was a scapegoat at her last job at Pondran Cellars or if she dodged a bullet by leaving, when her winemaking principles were undermined. Fine wine can't be rushed. Faith and Grace watched their exchange closely, holding hands as if they were in some kind of horror movie, ready to unleash deadly powers if Christine took this argument too far. Yes, Christine had no social life. Yes, she watched too many scary films. Yes, she might have leaped into this job too quickly since Slade seemed more interested in volume than quality. We should talk. A classic brush-off line from a boss who'd already made up his mind. That alarm in her head buzzed louder. But let's get out of the heat before we discuss it further. You remember where El Rosal is? On the town square? At her nod, Slade stepped out beneath the blazing sun, which painted silver-blue highlights in his black hair, as if he were a hunky rock star and she was just one of the little people in the audience dancing to the beat of his hypnotic drum. I need a life. Or at least, an outlet for her overactive imagination. Wilting in the heat, Christine trailed behind Slade and his 2 goth girls, reluctantly contemplating her next job search.